Rare earth materials have become a hot global issue. China controls 97% of the production of these strategic resources. They're vital to everything from green tech to whole swaths of the electronic industries. They're in your BlackBerries, they're in your iPhones. Interestingly, China has made some moves in recent months to begin limiting or controlling its export of rare earth metals, much to the consternation of Japan and other advanced Western economies. Our next guest has been studying the strategic implications of all of this very closely. Yaron Vorona is the Executive Director of Technology and Rare Earth Metals. This is the guy you want to talk to. At the center of this debate, it's the Institute for the Analysis of Global Security. Yaron, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start just with basics here. What are rare earth metals? They're not really metal, or sorry, they're not earth. They're something else, and they're in fact not that rare.
That's right. They're not rare. They're found in many locations. If you think back, way back to your high school chemistry, you'd remember the periodic table down there at the bottom of the two rows, the lanthanides, the actinides. Those lanthanides, plus another 215 plus two other elements, are the rare earths. They are generally used in magnets, optic end products, anywhere you have phosphors. And so they become really important in a number of clean tech, green tech, and defense applications. For example, wind turbines use rare earth magnets, as do electric vehicles, hybrid electric vehicles. Your cell phone probably has a little rare earth magnet vibrating in it. Rare earth phosphors are used in compact fluorescent light bulbs. And so these are really critical and strategic elements for our clean tech future. Speaking to defense, anywhere where you have motors that can potentially change the direction of a missile, night vision to protect Canadian and American troops overseas. Any of those applications are also uses for rare earths. The current issue is, of course, that China controls about 97% of the world's rare earths.
So my question for you is, how did China end up with 97% control?
Well, they actually only have about a third of the world's supply. It's a lot cheaper to produce in China. Labor-wise, obviously, there's been a lot of news over environmental standards. From what I understand, China has great environmental standards, but really, really poor policing and enforcement of those standards. And so they were basically able to price other producers out of the market, particularly in the past. Molycorp down in Mountain Pass, California, was one of the world's big producers of rare earths, and they were since shut down and have plans to reopen in the near future.
Okay, so what are the implications? Because we're hearing now there's complaints out there. I don't know if they ever made an official announcement that they were cutting exports, but people are complaining that they have slashed exports. They're trying to limit and control production. What are the implications for global manufacturing industry?
Sure. Well, first of all, there are three distinct actions that China has taken. And they're not all the same. They don't all have the same motivations. There's been massive consolidation within the Chinese industry and a reduction in production. In the northern area, there's now only one company left producing. In the south, where they have a heavy rare earths versus the lights, there are a lower number of companies producing, and they've cut back on the production. The second action is officially export quotas. They've taken export quotas. They've been in place for a number of years, and they've been reducing those export quotas. Most significantly, this last quarter, the one that's ending now, was a 70% reduction year on year. It's something like a 40% reduction in total of rare earth export quotas. In the past few years, the rest of the world hasn't used the full quota amount, but it is cutting back on the availability of supply. And then there was a third thing that was denied by China. Although we did hear reports that shipments of rare earths out of China were being held up in ports, and there was a de facto ban of exports to Japan and the U.S. And that's a severe concern, because the only reason to do that is geopolitical muscle flexing, probably in relation to the dispute with Japan over the East China Sea, the dispute with the U.S. in its support of the Southeast Asian nations in the South China Sea. And looking at those two bodies of water, what you have are basically the shipping routes in and out of Asia. China's also been expanding its buildup of its Navy, purchasing discount-priced shipbuilding facilities in Greece and building their own. So there is a broader geopolitical play. That aside, the reasons for them are less important than the implications, as you asked. And the implications are that North American clean tech and defense industries are now dependent on a single supplier. That supplier is cutting back exports of the raw materials. And there needs to be perhaps some policy changes from the U.S. and potentially the Canadian government to address that.
Is the key policy change, should it be trying to go out and either restart our facilities in California? There's rare earth metals in Canada here, undeveloped in our north. Should that be part of the West's response to the seeming politicization of this vital international resource?
Well, I'd say the first thing is it's not time to panic, but rather make intelligent policy decisions and informed holistic policy decisions. Usually defense policies, energy policies, resource policies, and trade policies are all made independent of each other, and it's time to take a holistic view of those. And that's what we do at the center. We try to bring together the different policymakers with industry to discuss these. It's what we are doing in March at our annual DC Policy Conference. But investing in research and development in the raw science is key. China's done this extremely successfully over the past few years. We haven't. There's no knowledge, even if all of our resources were to come online. There are vulnerabilities within the supply chain for processing and separating the individual rare earths that can only be addressed, can partially be addressed through investing into research and development. Obviously, responding to trade imbalances appropriately with the WTO and other diplomatic efforts are going to be a key. There's talk of providing loan guarantees in the U.S. for helping to restart the industry. So there are a number of policy issues, steps that can be taken.
Those are more longer term, though, things. And my question is, well, from what I understand, we're 5 years away from any new resource being developed outside of China. What's the potential for some kind of trade war flare-up in the meantime, or industry being caught short-handed?
I wouldn't go so far as to say a trade war. That's, I think, a little reactionary. I think that, we've seen statements. The Secretary of State in the U.S., Hillary Clinton, has spoken to her Chinese counterparts to try to open up the trade. But I do see a problem potentially with a shortfall in raw materials. Historically, companies have had a supply and able to use up their inventories of raw material, and those inventories are being eaten up. So I do see a constraint in supply. There's no really good information source out there, which is a key point of investment that we need to make in making the information available for how much stockpile exists and being able to facilitate those private companies to keep their businesses going, particularly in green tech.
Great. Well, Yaron, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks for coming on to making a pretty complicated global issue, I think, quite relevant and engaging for our viewers.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Our guest was Yaron Vorona, the Executive Director of Technology and Rare Earth Metals Center at the Institute for Analysis of Global Security in Washington, D.C.